The world awoke to the risks of chemical contamination when Rachel Carson published Silent Spring over half a century ago in 1962, where she specifically warned about certain persistent pesticides used in agriculture. Since her book came out, the volume of pesticides in use worldwide has increased tenfold, this is in agriculture, to around 5 million tonnes a year. Now, don't get me wrong, chemicals and minerals are valuable and extremely useful. They do a great deal of good, they save many lives and much money. No one is suggesting they should all be banned, but their value may count for little if the current uncontrolled, unmonitored, unregulated, and unconscionable mass release and planetary saturation continues. Since the poisoning of the people of Minamata in Japan with toxic mercury in the 1950s, there has been a string of high-profile chemical scandals. The Love Canal, Seveso, Bhopal, Erin Brockovich, most recently Fukushima, Tianjin, and the Indian school lunch tragedy. The one thing that these events mostly have in common is that the onus of proof is on the victims to prove that they have been harmed and show how. Rarely, if ever, are industry and government held accountable or obliged to show that chemical processes are safe or harmless. Consequently, there is now an unproductive confrontation between angry, frightened citizens and industry and regulators. This leads to long drawn out legal battles that deliver justice to nobody. An important point in my book is that blaming industry and calling for tougher regulation will not solve the problem of the poisoned planet. We need a smarter way to protect society and all future generations from the toxic flood. And this starts with recognizing that we are the ones responsible. We are the ones who generate the market signals that lead to the mass production and ill-considered release of toxins. Every act of consumption on a crowded planet has chemical consequences. Please bear that in mind whenever you buy anything. Every dollar we spend sends a signal to a string of industries which emit a mass of chemicals, either as products or as toxic waste into our environment. Those innocent dollar signals are killing 12 million people a year, a new Holocaust every 6 months. In a sense, we are all getting away with murder. This uncomfortable thought is essential to modern society taking effective action to clean up the earth and to protect our children into the future. If we have given rise to the problem by demanding goods which are produced using toxic substances or with toxic processes, then we alone have the power to correct it. It is already clear that governments do not have the capacity or the will to regulate a global toxic flood. Indeed, many governments, if not most, are in the pockets of the global petrochemical and fossil fuels industry. Regulation is important, don't get me wrong, but if we rely on rules alone to protect our children, the evidence is that they will not succeed. In a globalized world, only we, the people, are powerful enough as consumers to send the market signals to industry to cease toxic emissions and to properly reward industry for producing clean, safe, healthy products and services. For the first time in human history, we have the means to share a universal understanding of a common threat and what we can each do to mitigate it. Through the internet and social media, concerned citizens and parents are already mobilizing around the world. This conference is an example of that process in action. We are reaching out to one another across borders, cultural, ethnic, religious, linguistic, and economic divides. Good, concerned people are joining hands at light speed to cleanse our poisoned planet. Now, this is an expression of people power and global democracy like none before it. The organisations on this slide, for example, have a combined membership of more than 55 million people. Many more are sharing knowledge, advice, ideas about how to protect our children and clean up society through their own networks. For example, I myself follow renewable and regenerative farming discourse around the world on social media. It's stunning. Ideas are flowing at the speed of light among farmers around the world on how to produce food cleanly, safely, and environmentally soundly. In a technique known as distributed action, organisations like 350.org have assembled a worldwide protest movement of more than 1 million people. This is a short step from protesting about carbon to protesting about toxic chemistry. Now, there are many exciting new technologies and approaches being trialled to clean up our planet. And as somebody who's worked with the scientists who are operating in this area for more than 20 years, I know, I've spoken to them at international forums and conferences and things like that. There's some wonderful ideas out there for how you clean up this mess. Green chemistry, industrial ecology, cradle-to-cradle manufacturing, product stewardship, and zero waste. Those are just some of the more high-profile ones. But we have to find ways to encourage industry to adopt. And the most effective of these are consumer-generated market signals. Far from being harmful to industry, this universal demand for clean, safe products will open fresh markets. It will create new jobs, build new companies, and generate greater prosperity. Now, we're already seeing it happen in the energy space, in transport. Electric vehicles, renewable energy and things like that are taking off. Now, we need a similar revolution in the area of all kinds of manufacturing and processing, especially food. We need renewable food now. There are 10 ways in which we can all contribute to unpoisoning our world. And this is my 10-point plan. You can find a lot more details in the book. First of all, we need to form a partnership. All the organizations on Earth who are interested or concerned about this issue need to join hands. There's no good battling on in our own little bailiwicks and corners. We have to form a global movement of people. Otherwise, we will not be heard by these very large corporations that are, in most cases, bigger than countries. Second, we need to demand a new human right not to be poisoned, and I will discuss that shortly. Third, we need to eliminate coal, oil, gas, and all forms of fossil fuels straight away. Really, certainly by 2030. Now, we need to do that for climate anyway. Otherwise, the climate is going to render the Earth uninhabitable by the end of this century. But the second reason we want to do it is that most of the poisons are made from these things. And if we get rid of them, then we have got rid of the major source of poisoning on the planet. Most of the pharmaceuticals, the chemicals, the industrial chemicals and so on are made from oil or coal. So, if we solve that one, then we have reduced poisoning more than somewhat. We need to ask our doctors to adopt preventative healthcare. I mean, at the moment, doctors are little better than salespeople for the global pharmaceutical company, which in turn is the handmaid of the petrochemical industry. So we need, instead of treating people with chemical diseases with new chemicals to try and cure them, we need to stop the diseases in the first place. I mean, it's absolutely obvious we need a preventative model in Western medicine and universal medicine. The next thing is that we need to train our young scientists as we train our young doctors. First, do no harm. That is the Hippocratic Oath that every young medical graduate takes when they leave their university first do no harm. But chemists don't take such an oath. Physicists don't take such an oath. Engineers don't take such an oath. They have professional standards, but none of these bind them to making sure that they only do good. And I believe we have to bind them when they are young, right? Not leave it until later on when they're making pots of money out of producing nasty industrial chemicals. So we need to get our science worldwide back to an ethical basis, which it has quite abandoned. We need to educate our kids in how to choose non-toxic products. And fortunately, there are new apps arriving on your phone and things like that, where you can scrutinize things in the supermarket and find out what's in them and are they safe or not to eat. So the information is becoming more and more accessible. It's difficult to get, I admit that, especially if you go out and really try to clean up your lifestyle. It's a terribly big ask. But the information is now coming forward, and there's heaps and heaps of organizations, the Breast Cancer Foundation, all the people who are interested in cleaning up cosmetics and personal care products. There's hundreds of websites worldwide about clean and healthy food now. So this information is starting to flood out there, and we just need to incorporate it in our education system and in what parents teach their children. Don't pick that because it's got preservatives in it. Eat fresh. Don't take that particular thing because it's got industrial dye in it made from coal. The cheese in that hamburger is bright yellow because it's been dyed with coal. Avoid those foods which basically are not good for you. We need to reward industry by buying green. The industries that do this. At the moment, green chemistry makes up only 0.002 of all the chemicals sold on Earth. That's how small. It is a tiny, tiny proportion of all the chemicals sold on Earth. The rest of them come out of the big, dirty, toxic process. So, we need to convert the chemical industry to green chemistry. They can see the opportunities in it, but there are no economic signals telling them to do it yet. And we have to create those signals by choosing, when we go into the shops, the things that are safe and clean and green. We should test all chemical products for safety. This should be mandated worldwide. We need an inventory. First of all, there isn't one. There isn't a world inventory of chemicals, right? So we've got the IPCC keeping an eye on what's going on in the atmosphere, but we have got nobody like that keeping an eye on what's going on in this flood of chemicals, which is 5 times bigger than the harm we're causing the atmosphere. So we need an international body now, an intergovernmental body that regulates and monitors all of these chemicals and tries to identify which ones are really bad for us and should be got rid of. We've got the Stockholm Convention, but as I mentioned, only 19 chemicals have so far been banned, and there's 2,000 more being produced this year. So, that's a race we're never going to win at this rate. We need to ban all chemicals from coming on the market until they have been shown to be safe to humans, including especially children, and the wild, the environment generally. We need to clean up our food and our diet. The industrial system of agriculture that we've got is not going to last, okay? It's going to collapse around about the mid-century. There are 3 reasons for that. Primarily, first of all, we're losing water like you wouldn't believe. There is not enough water to grow the world's food any longer because the big cities have taken it from the farmers. Secondly, the soils are being eroded at a phenomenal rate. 75 billion tons of topsoil, as I mentioned earlier, are being lost every single year, cumulatively. That means half the world's farmland is going to be washed or blown away in the next 50 years, basically. So the world farmed area is going to decrease by half anyway. And thirdly, of course, climate. We can't stop the world going probably to 2 degrees or even 3 degrees by the middle of this century, and 4 degrees where agriculture becomes impossible by the end of the century. So we need a new way to produce food that is climate proof, doesn't use a lot of water, and doesn't use a lot of soil. And that is what I describe in my book, Food or War. Now, that system also purges the use of chemicals. We don't need to use chemicals to produce a large volume of wholesome, nutritious, sustainable food. Okay, so I described that process in the book. Some of it involves high technology, certainly. We can't do it all on small family farms, but we can feed the world well and without waste in a much better way than we are at the moment if we follow the prescription in Food or War. I'm happy to take questions on that if people want to ask more about it. But basically, renewable food, like renewable energy, is the key to a safe, sustainable human future. Now, I mentioned a right, the right. Every one of us in the world has a right to life, liberty, personal security, to marriage and family, to equality, work, education, to freedom of belief, to freedom from torture. These rights are available to all of us under the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. But to me, it is more than a little disturbing that there is no human right not to be poisoned. There's probably not a large number of people being tortured in the world at the moment, but we have a right not to be tortured, which can be invoked against any government. But there is no right not to be poisoned, and everybody is being poisoned, everybody at the moment. Unless and until we have such a right, there will probably never again be a day in history when we and our children are free from man-made poisons. Now, having a right doesn't mean that it abolishes the problem, but what it does is it raises the profile of the problem, and it starts to put enforcement agencies and public scrutiny on the companies or the individuals who may be perpetrating the poison. The chemical avalanche is 5 times larger than our climate emissions. It is here, and it's killing 13 million people a year. And yet it is not receiving a fraction of the public, government, and media attention that it deserves. I hope if you read Earth Detox, you will agree that this is a catastrophic threat to the human future, to the future of every single one of us alive today or to be born in the remainder of this century. It demands our understanding, our care, and our resolute action for the sake of all who come up.